Have you ever felt overwhelmed by the news? Like it's a constant barrage of information, opinions, and supposed experts that leave you wondering, can you even trust it anymore? That's why we are here. On Trust But Verify, we are doing the hard work to giving you the tools you need to make informed decisions. Helping me on this, Dr. Aloyar Kangarloo, a geopolitical mastermind with a brain scientist's eye for detail. Together, we'll separate facts from fiction because in this world, having clarity is power. So, Doctor, are you ready to crack the code on this week's headlines? This week, we are tackling a firestorm on Trust But Verify. Tensions are high following the death of Iranian President Raisi. On Uncensored, by Piers, Dr. Marandi of Tehran University fiercely rejected the label of Butcher of Iran for Raisi and that his death is celebrated by many Iranians. Instead, he pointed fingers at Western powers. Let's hear closely and then get our expert analysis.
Obviously, what you're saying is inaccurate, to say the least. I would say the butchers are in London, in Washington, the people who destroyed Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen during the disgraceful genocide there, the dirty war in Syria, the destruction of Libya, the sanctions on Venezuela and Cuba. I think that the real monsters are actually much more closer to home.
Strong word, Dr. Kangarloo. What's your take on Dr. Marandi's comparison of the Islamic Republic of Iran's regime to Western governments?
There is no comparison. Islamic Republic is a government, is a regime that is driven by an antiquated ideology that has nothing to do with the modern world, while the United States, Britain, and most of the European countries are based and managed based on the ideology of liberalism and democracy. There is absolutely no comparison. The fact that he refers to these governments as regimes, I mean, there is a difference between a regime and a government. These governments are all democratically elected. They are a true representation of their people. And while the Iranian regime is a tyrannical, oppressive, criminal government that basically doesn't respect the international relation, doesn't respect the international organizations and the way that the world has managed itself. The Iranian regime has a dark record that no one, including Dr. Marandi, can ever whitewash the crimes of the Iranian government. You know, as we go on with this show, I'm going to count some of the crimes that has been committed by the government in general and specifically by Mr. Raisi, the last president who just died last week.
Marandi said people will see President Raisi's popularity at the funeral ceremony. Just like General Soleimani's, millions will show up, and Western media distorts reality. What is your opinion on that?
It's lie, and it's lie. Not millions attended Soleimani's funeral. You can imagine that in a country that the largest employer is the government, and 40% of the employment force is really government wage earners, and the government has full control over the people who they've employed, and it's very well known fact that they constantly demand from the government workers to attend all the officially sanctioned ceremonies like Soleimani's funeral, like Raisi's funeral, and like the religious ceremonies and so on and so forth. So referring to those numbers in an oppressive regime as a measure of popularity of a regime is really a fallacy at best and an utter lie at worst. And Dr. Marandi has apparently perfected that skill in the apparatus of the Iranian regime. His father is the special doctor to the supreme leader, and he has been raised and groomed from very young ages after he returned from the United States to Iran by the regime, by the indoctrination of the regime, to become this mouthpiece to the whitewashing of the regime's crimes.
Let's examine the part about Iranian regime's role in the Middle East. Piers said that Iran's support for terrorist groups like Hezbollah, Houthis, and Hamas is clear, and asked why Marandi does downplay his regime's role in terrorism. Marandi answered that Hezbollah was a group that was created as a result of the Israeli regime's invasion of Lebanon, that they went and captured the capital in 1982, he said. And he added that Hamas and other groups in Palestine are the result of 76 years of oppression and ethnic cleansing, and Houthis and Ansarullah are the result of a decade of genocide carried out by the Saudis and Emiratis, who are allies to Western powers, and who West is supporting to starve out the people of Yemen, to bring them to their knees, and failed, said Marandi. He said that these groups have popularity and support, and the West misrepresented the situation. Dr. Kangalu, how do you react to these very different perspectives? What can help us understand what's truly happening in the region?
Well, Dr. Marandi is highly selective in the historic facts. Obviously, if you read history like that, you could make anything look like, any fake news look like reality. In 1982, actually prior to 1982, Palestinian organization, PLO, was housed and was stationed in Lebanon. And Lebanon was completely dysfunctional because of the presence of the Palestine Liberation Organization, or PLO. And they were basically running the affairs of the Lebanon, and they were using Lebanon as a basis to attack Israel. Part of Lebanon was occupied by PLO, and the other part was occupied by Syrians. And Israel was at war with Syria and with PLO, and they were constantly receiving the barrage of rockets and missile attacks from Lebanon. So eventually, in 1982, they took an incursion into Lebanon and wiped out Palestinians' bases, basically, and around Beirut, and completely surrounded Beirut. And they were about to enter into Beirut and wipe the Palestinians out of the capital, Beirut, and then through some negotiations with the intermediaries, with the Arab intermediaries, PLO agreed to leave Lebanon, and they went into Tripoli, Libya, and that ended. But the most important fact that regime, the Islamic Republic regime, and its supporters like Dr. Marandi leave out is the fact that Palestinians under the leadership, the interest of Palestinians under the leadership of PLO and Yasser Arafat at the time, they were involved in negotiations with Israel. And these negotiations were going on productively. And even though the Palestinians left the Lebanon, the negotiation about the two-state solution that eventually bore fruit in 1993 Oslo Agreement was ongoing between the Palestinian Liberation Organization and Israel. In fact, the Iranian government, the regime of Islamic Republic, they started, as the Iran-Iraq war was winding down, they started in exerting influence in Lebanon and in Syria and in some of the other Arab countries. And one of the things that Iranian embassy, Hezbollah, was created under the auspices of the Iranian ambassador in Lebanon at the time. It was masterminded, it was funded, it was trained, all the intelligence was provided by the Iranian government with only one intention: not to liberate Palestine, but to sabotage the peace process. That was the mission of Hezbollah. So from the time that Hezbollah was established in 1982, it has been doing exactly that. And the same way later on it happened in Gaza when Israel pulled out of Gaza during the Ariel Sharon's prime ministership. There was a war, there was a fight between different competing Palestinian factions, between Hamas and PLO, and Hamas violently defeated PLO and drove them out of Gaza. And a lot of Palestinians were killed by Palestinians, by Hamas at the time, and completely took over Gaza. And now we have a two-pronged situation where Hezbollah, which is established, trained, and supported by the Iranian regime in Lebanon, and now Gaza and Islamic Jihad in Gaza, they are now attacking Israel from both sides and taking their orders from Tehran. So what would Israel do in a situation like this? And the Palestinians, the moderate Palestinians, which was represented by Abu Mazen and Mahmoud Abbas, they were really confined to the West Bank. So Israel was willing to continue negotiation with Abu Mazen and with the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, but Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon were fixed on destroying the peace process. So it's very important to make sure that we understand that the job and the responsibility and the duty of these two organizations is to sabotage peace. Don't allow any peace to be established between Palestinians and Israelis. And the fact that he's talking about the massacring and all these loaded words like genocide and things like that is really inflammatory literature, because someone who doesn't respect facts can use any language they want to really make their point. And that's exactly what Dr. Marandi is doing.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Kangaroo, Marandi claims in that interview that there is support for these groups in the region. What's your opinion on that?
If by the region, if he means in certain places in Iran under the auspices of the Islamic regime, he's right. But by region, if he means the greater Middle East and the Arab countries and most of the Arab countries and Islamic countries like Iran and Turkey, he's absolutely right. I mean, Iranians, as far as the Iranians go, we have heard them, the slogans in all their demonstration, that neither Gaza, neither Lebanon, I die for Iran, which means the movement, at least the movement, the part of the Palestinian movement represented by Hamas, has no support among the Iranian masses. Now we have two factions. We have the moderate camp, who is for two-state solution, and we have the irreconcilable faction like Hamas and Islamic Jihad and Hezbollah, who only take their orders from Tehran, from Ayatollah Khamenei. So the people who take their order from Ayatollah Khamenei, and then relationship between the Iranian regime and these factions, the Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and Hezbollah, is such that the Iranian regime has created these factions not to support the cause of an independent Palestinian state, but to use as a card, as a playing card when it sits at tables with the superpowers. Iranian regime is using these factions, and when it's using, it's not using it for the betterment of the conditions of the Palestinians in the occupied lands. Not for a minute. If there is any Palestinian who thinks the Iranian regime has their best interest in heart, they're really profoundly and tragically mistaken. The Iranian regime is looking at Palestinians and looking at the Houthis and looking at the Hezbollah as a way of strengthening their hand in negotiations with development of weapons of mass destruction. That's all. But the Palestinians, poor Palestinians, are under the impression that the Iranian regime is helping them to eventually wipe Israel off the map. Neither wiping Israel off the map is on the card, nor Iranian regime really has the best interest of the Palestinians in their heart. So Palestinians should really think twice when they're putting all their cards on the Iranian regime. They have to come back to the two-state solution, to 1993, to moderate voices within the Palestinian movement, and drive the Islamic government out of the equation of solving the Palestine-Israel problem.
Let's examine the next section. In response to the oppression of women that Piers Morgan brought up, Marandi claims that women are commercialized and sexualized in the West, and invokes Jeffrey Epstein and many Epsteins, according to him, who control women's freedom, and posits that women in the West too are not free to dress how they wish. He claims that we in Iran, we have women pilots, we have women scientists. He said that my boss at the University of Tehran, the dean of his faculty, is a woman, and said that Western empire is on the decline. He said at home you are crushing students for protesting genocide in another country, and you call it a democracy. And while Piers Morgan was insisting about the imposed hijab law and enforcement officers beating up people for that, Marandi said Piers is referring to a law in Iran that most people accept, and that is part of their culture. Dr. Kangaroo, please help me understand, help us understand, is that law accepted by most Iranians, and is hijab part of Iranian culture?
Hijab is not part of Iranian culture. Hijab actually is part of the global culture. I don't think hijab in the absolute meaning of the word which means decency in attire and in public appearance. In that sense, I think all the women in the world are decent human beings and they don't need orders and laws. Their public appearance does not need to be regulated by law. They are, I mean, whether they live in Tehran or whether they live in London or New York, I think vast majority of women, they don't really need any regulations, as there is none existent in any of the countries outside Iran or outside some of the Islamic countries. The problem with Dr. Marandi and his mentality and the mentality of his peers in the Islamic Republic is that they simply have no respect for women. They have no respect for women to make decisions, not decisions about what they wear in public, decisions about travel by themselves, decisions about who to marry, decisions about how to take companions in life, whether to take the companionship of the opposite gender or not. That is the problem. The problem with the Islamic regime is that human beings, they don't have rights in their minds. The right in their mind and their mentality belongs to God. And your right on earth, your privileges on earth, is a function of your obedience. This is a direct verse of Quran. Inna akramakum indallah atqakum. It means in the eyes of God, the most obedient are the dearest. So that's about the general public. And then there is a huge distinction between men and women in Islam. Women don't have the same heritage, they don't have the same right of vote, the same right to take the high offices, presidency or the supreme leader or the leadership in the military, and on and on and on. Discrimination against women in Islam doesn't need me as a critic. Discrimination against women is very well established, and no one can really claim that there is a human right in Islam or there is an equality between races and genders in Islam. He refers to the fact that more than 60-70% of the population of the universities are women. That is true, but you have to ask yourself, why do you go to university? To eventually go to the marketplace, go to the workplace, and take a job that hopefully is in quality and pay is a better job than if you had not gone to university. So a college education is supposed to bring you a better life. But the presence of women in public ends at the last year of their presence in the university. As soon as they graduate, they have to go back home and become a housewife or a mother. That's exactly, these are word by word advices of the supreme leader. So you can make a very simple comparison. 70% of the university students are women, but only 12% of the labor force is women, 12%. And those 12% are really insignificant secretarial jobs. No woman in the high offices that can be decision-making or basically participate in the political process. So Mr. Marandi is really very selective in using some statistics, for instance, referring to the fact that his boss is a woman, or they just recruited 2 women in the faculty. That's all true, but against the background of statistics over the status of women in the entire country, women are in the forefront of struggle against the Islamic regime for a very good reason. In every society, the strata of the society, the group of people who are oppressed the most will reveal the most energy, will release the most energy to place themselves at the frontiers of a struggle against that regime. So that's exactly what is happening. Women life freedom was a clear indication that Mr. Marandi is lying and is covering up for the regime's discrimination, massive discrimination against women.
Actually, something else about this whole hijab law and dress codes needs to be examined in this clip as well. Morgan said, if a woman chooses to wear hijab, that's fine. Endorsing it is objectionable. And Marandi says, in the West, increasingly women who have hijab are being sidelined. They're losing their jobs, whether it is in France, whether it is in England, and in other parts of Europe. Let's verify this. Dr. Kangaroo.
It's a lie again. The universities in the United States, in my own university, Columbia University, I have many students. There are faculty members who wear hijab. We have women wearing hijab who are members of the US House of Representatives. Muslims in the United States actually have an upper hand in some areas like Michigan, Detroit, East Lansing, and Dearborn, and in some other states that they don't have as many populations like in California and New York. They still have tremendous amount of freedom. Basically, in the United States, your freedom is not based on your religion and your gender. This country is based on the tenets of liberal democracy, and the fact that these rights are all guaranteed and protected in the Constitution and various other judiciary institutions in this country, and the fact that they refer to Western women as corrupt and naked and all the derogatory adjectives that they use against Western women is really out of jealousy and out of hostility towards the achievements of women in the West. If you look at the different parts of social activities in the Western, and not only in the Western world, but in the free world in general, women really participate in every domain in economic activity, in social activity. We have women who take high offices. The Vice President of the United States is woman. And we have women prime ministers in history of England, in many of the European countries, and now Estonia, Latvia, so many other countries, women are taking very high office. A Speaker of the Parliament of Europe are women. These women are extremely decent women who are human being first and women next. So the fact that the Iranian regime and their ideologues, they cannot go beyond the sexualization of women. Actually, the people who sexualize women and devoid and drain women of their humanity is the Islamic regime. The Islamic regime doesn't look at the woman as a human being first. If we guarantee, in the West, we don't guarantee the right of women or the right of men or the right of tall people or short people. We protect the right of human beings, and anyone who falls under that category, their rights are protected. In Iran, they arrest, in the Islamic Republic, I should say, they arrest a woman for not conforming with the official compulsory code of conduct, which they call it hijab. So if something is part of a culture, I might ask, why should it be enforced through the law? Does anybody enforce Nowruz celebration through the law? Does anybody enforce Charshambeh Suri by the law? Does anybody enforce all the other cultural issues, the Yalda as by law? If it is part of our culture, it's a very simple matter of history and sociology, that the matters of cultural significance do not need legal and forceful enforcement. So on that account too, Mr. Marandi is catastrophically wrong.
The last section of the conversation, Marandi said to Morgan, you will see women take to the streets during the funeral, and then I will wonder how you are going to explain that it is North Korea and how the evil mullahs are forcing people to come to the streets. Morgan said last time you came on this program, you tried to pretend that the regime has the widespread support of Iranian people, but he said as many as 80% of Iranian people despise your totalitarian regime. And Marandi said, in your wild dreams. Dr. Kangalu, what is your reaction to that exchange of facts?
Yes, Mr. Marandi, once again, is counting on us for getting facts. I know that he knows facts, but he deliberately denies it, but he's also counting on our historic memory. Well, let's see how the Iranian Revolution happened. The Iranian Revolution happened in 1976 through 1979, and the Pahlavi government was overthrown in the February of 1979. Between February and April of 1979, Iranian government, Islamic Republic, actually conducted a referendum. And in that referendum, according to their claim, 98% of Iranians voted to establish an Islamic Republic. In other words, voted against Pahlavis, voted against the way that Iran was managed during Pahlavi, which was a modern state based on the national sovereignty and the national interest. Within the last 4 decades, especially the polls taken within the last 3 to 5 years by different independent institutions, by Gaman out of the Netherlands, by Erfi out of Washington, D.C., and by Pew, an independent American poll taker, shows that 80% of Iranians have gone beyond, not only beyond Islamic Republic, but also beyond Islam. So think about it. In a matter of 4 decades, the Iranian people have gone from 80% support of Islamic Republic to 80% opposing the Islamic Republic. It means 160% flipping of opinion, 160% change in the people's opinion. How could a society who was Islamic, who believed in this faith for millennium, suddenly in 40 years goes through some drastic change of opinion and drastic change of heart? This could only be attributed to the performance and to the record of the Iranian regime. Prior to the Iranian regime, Iranians basically practiced the kind of Islam as any other religion is practiced by the ordinary citizens in any other country, which means within the private domain and private realm, and there was no structured and organized government-conducted interference in enforcing the codes of Islam. After the regime, after the Iranian government, after the Pahlavi government fell, Iranian government 180-degree change in policies and started to enforce Islamic tenets through codifying them into the constitution and into the judiciary, into the penal codes, and so on and so forth. And then Iranians started becoming educated about the content of their Holy Scripture, because as long as the content of the Holy Scripture remained in the Holy Scripture, the people had the choice of reading it and not reading it. And that was exactly why they still believed in Islam. But when the verses, when the tenets of a religion become the constitution, becomes the penal code, becomes the criminal code, becomes the civil code, then Iranians will learn it because every day they have to interact with it. And within 40 short years, Iranians decided that they don't want to have Islam as the basis of the way that the society is managed. So it's absolutely wrong about when he refers to the popularity of the regime and the numbers he uses. The best indication of what is really, I mean, the best indirect indication of how popular or unpopular a regime is the participation in the various elections. We had a presidential election, we had a full-term parliament election 2 years ago, and a midterm parliament election. Within the last 2 elections, the full-term parliament election and the midterm parliament election, the participation has been from 8% to 3%.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kangarloo, for your insights. We also thank you for being with us on this journey to clarity. We believe you deserve to know what's real, what's relevant, and most importantly, what matters to you.